Welcome to On the Record. I'm Officer Beth Ruoff, standing in for the absolutely irreplaceable Matt Sanders, here with Chief Shields. Good morning, Chief Shields.
Hey, Beth. You've got a high bar to live up to, or a very low bar. I'm not sure which.
Maybe a little bit of all of that, especially after Lieutenant Burbring from Homicide was the last guest.
Yes.
So, yeah, we got a big shoes to fill here today. So, what do you want to talk about?
Well, all right. Tell me a little bit about yourself. You've been all over the media of recent. So you're our public affairs and public information officer. Tell us a little bit about the job and what you've been up to.
Yeah, so I've been an officer for 15 years. I was in narcotics for about 8 years before I got asked to come up to the PIO position. Here we do all of the media management and responding to crime scenes and giving on-scene statements and that kind of stuff.
You've been busy lately, haven't you? Too busy.
Extremely busy. Unfortunately, we just had our 100th homicide, and every time I go out to these scenes, it's really disheartening. Just the level of violence we're seeing out here is unbelievable to me. I was born in Louisville and was raised here, went to school here and everything, and this is just a situation that we've got to get a handle on. So what I want to talk to you about is what are we going to do here? Let's talk about policing, and I think getting back to basics, and that's what I want to know about from you,
Sure.
and I want to talk about that a little bit. So
Bring it on.
I think maybe some of the people watching should know about just basic definitions of policing. Let's talk about just the basic day in and day out of calls for service and what proactivity means. So can you tell everybody what that means, what policing day in, day out looks like?
Sure. So traditional policing, I think, was more around responding to 911 calls, and where police were there because a law enforcement function was needed. And I think when you go back, the demands on law enforcement were not nearly as broad as they are today. So you did have much more in the way of community engagement and downtime by the officers. And what you've seen evolve over the years, particularly, I would say, I believe in the early 2000s, it really seemed like so many of our social services shut down. I know it started before then, but I feel like the real ripple effect hit cities during that time. And police started having to become specialists in so many different areas. So now the 911 calls that maybe used to be a traffic accident, domestic violence, a theft, run the gamut and may heavily lean towards what really is a social service issue. So that's the driver of the 911 piece. And so what you're trying to do as an enforcement agency, an employer, is ensure that your officers have the skill set to handle whatever they're confronted with. Then there's the piece of what do we need to do to ensure that these crimes, the true crimes, don't occur. The burglaries, the carjackings. And that requires that police be self-initiated, meaning you're going out to, and you're either looking for an individual who has a warrant on them that investigators drawn up. It means you're going to an area that's showing repeated incidents of a criminal act so that you're present in the area. Maybe you can deter some crime. It means that somehow you are getting ahead of the criminal activity and offsetting it before it occurs. And unfortunately, when you look across the United States, what you see is cities across the U.S. are all struggling with an uptick in violent crime, but also a reluctance by law enforcement to be proactive. I think there's a very real fear. I'll just take here. So coming into LMPD, what is very apparent is that there is a real reluctance by officers to go and initiate any sort of enforcement for fear that if it goes viral and someone just doesn't think it should occur, or if force has to be used And let me say this, policing will never be use of force free. That's just when you're the one that is tasked with dealing with individuals who are inflicting harm, violence on communities, you have to know that the police, unfortunately, are not always going to be able to just ask someone to get in the back of the patrol car and it's going to go well. The key is, how do we use the force and when do we use it? But it's going back to the officers. There's the very real fear that, will I get punished? Will I have people targeting my house, my family? Will I be made, how is this going to turn out? Do the people really want us to police?
Right, right.
And so that is the space that I find LMPD in. It's very interesting. In 2019, there were a series of traffic stops that were high profile here, and they really were indicative of whether it was racial profiling or just extremely poor judgment by the officers. I don't know. But unfortunately, rather than just stepping back and saying, listen, we're going to retrain, aggressively retrain, we're going to discipline appropriately the officers who are engaging in this behavior, and we're going to work on an effort to make the department stronger in this area. The path that was taken, and I'm sure, if I've understood correctly, there was pressure from, it wasn't just a law enforcement decision. I think council weighed in on it too. I understand this. These things happen in policing, but this is where you have to push back. As a chief, the decision was made to really just stop being proactive, stop doing traffic stops. And the policy was rewritten, and it has a couple of key points in it, such as you should not be searching every car, which you shouldn't. I mean, really, searching a car should be exception, not the norm. And so there was a couple of things in it that are very good, but the policy also got very, very wordy. And wordy policies are difficult to implement. Police like clear direction. I think the key to understand is officers have to act in a lawful manner. And what I will say to you is, when you look at the most egregious events that have occurred in the United States in the last year, they weren't because of poorly written policies. They were written because of poor decision-making by officers, poor supervision, lack of accountability. I'm a firm believer that you cannot policy things to death. So what you saw in 2019 was proactive, self-initiating policing in Louisville went to a screeching halt. So you can just see the data, and it goes like this.
And that was at the point where our traffic stop policy was revised and included a lot of those aspects you said maybe weren't so clear, maybe a convoluted traffic stop policy that was rolled out, and then officers stopping people like they were.
Right. And also, I think more than that, more than the policy, I think the messaging that accompanied it was, just don't do this. Yeah. That was because when I came in, my first few months here, I didn't even know the policy had been changed, because what everyone told me was the messaging, the verbal messaging, the oral messaging was what said stop it. So you see the traffic stops, and not just traffic stop, the self-initiated stops just spiked down, and crime went straight up.
Right. And
then it levels off in January or February of 2020. Which probably also attributable to that is that winter does come here, and there's some snow, and that always helps crime, poor weather. But then you go back into when the protest, the Breonna Taylor went public, and the protests went nationally. Self-initiated calls have just dropped, plummeted, and crime has gone straight north. And I think what's important to note is the protests were for a very, very important reason. We as police have to take responsibility for the horrible pain and damage we have caused so many families. But that is a small percentage of the work that we do. And the work that we do, by and large, is very sound. It's very important, and it's well-intentioned. And I think that the problem is, if you want to take the posture of, well, we're not, and this is the posture that I'm seeing, and this is the posture, it's not just here, of, well, we're not going to be proactive. Okay, and this is what you get. because now we're in a reactive space,
Right.
which means there's any opportunity to disrupt violence. We're not seizing on. We're responding to the homicides, and that's where it's a very troubling space to get into, and it's not acceptable.
So something that is important to me, and I think important to a lot of officers, when everything came about and the public was crying for reform, and we were hearing a lot of negative talk just about policing in general and officers, which for a lot of us who come here day in and day out doing the right thing, was a really challenging space to navigate. For me personally, holding officers accountable is really important and always has been. And that was something I think maybe didn't get out enough to the public, that there are so many of officers doing the right thing, making good choices, and we want officers who aren't doing the right things to be held accountable. So many of us took this job to do the right thing and do it day in and day out. And so I think, moving forward, I think that that's something that's important, that we want the community to support us, but we don't expect them to support us when we do the wrong thing.
No, not at all.
I don't think any of us ask for unwavering support.
No.
We just want to be supported doing the right thing and doing the job in the right way. And we need that right now to move forward. And to your point about self-initiated activity, we've got to get back to that space. And I think a part of that is by being supported by the community and by being supported by the command. So that's something I want to talk to you about. Coming here as an outsider, you're from Atlanta. Louisville is a big, small city, really. Everybody knows everybody. Where'd you go to high school? Well, I went here. So everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, so they can vouch for you. You coming here from Atlanta, you went up through the ranks in Atlanta. You had street credit. We had an interim chief, Gentry, who rose through the ranks here. So I think maybe she had the feeling that there's always a squad of people behind her because she came up with us. So we knew her. Now you coming in here, it's a little different for you. You're an outsider. So we started last night a new detail, a violent crime disruption detail, and I want you to definitely speak about that. But what I saw was something different from you. I have yet to see a chief. For 15 years, I've been involved in multiple details, multiple task forces, different violent crime initiatives, narcotics initiatives throughout the summertime and the height of violent crime. But you actually were out on the street and you said something to the officers that really spoke to me. And it was about why we took this job. So I just want you to tell everybody a little bit about what you said to us, because it was very powerful to me.
So, and thank you for that. So yeah, it is difficult coming in as an outsider. And any chief who has come in to a job from the outside will tell you that. Because we all have our cultures, and there's always that fear that the chief coming from the outside will upset the culture. But what I would say to you is, usually if a chief is coming from the outside, it's because portions of the culture do need to be changed. Although I didn't know anybody here, here's what I do know. I know that police are good people. I know that they pursue this profession because they want to help people. And I know that any city that you or I or anyone else goes into, there is an immediate connection with the cop because we all have a mission to improve things. Is it always executed on appropriately? No, of course not. I will say again and again, I'm employing human beings. Enough said. So I knew coming here that because of the value I place on cops and policing the profession, that eventually things would start to come to fruition. It would be easier to stand back and to just continue to ride and navigate everything that's coming my way, whether it's the DOJ, the media, the personnel moves, the hiring and recruitment. It would be easier just to kind of manage And honestly, I think that I could just manage and be very successful because it would be an improvement how it's what the end result is. The problem is I'm not a manager, and I refuse, and I mean I refuse to stand by with my thumbs up my ass and watch innocent people get slaughtered. And by innocent people, I'm not here to judge what your lifestyle is. That's not for me. That's for a higher power. But none of us has the right to just arbitrarily go out and kill people. And that is what is occurring. And somehow it's acceptable. And I got into policing because I have an obligation. I believe I have an obligation. I know I have an obligation to take care of others. And I've been tasked with taking care of others. So who am I if I'm leading this organization and I'm just saying, well, this is okay because, I'm getting good kudos and props and it's going well and it's comfortable. No. Yes, there is a risk in going out and being proactive. Guess what? We might have a officer involved shooting. I hope not. But the alternative to sit there and just watch like a clock turning over, homicide, that's not in my DNA. That is not in the DNA of anyone who got into policing. So let's get our little selves upright. My little selves. Some people have big selves. But let's focus on what we've been trained to do. The community needs us and wants us. That's never been an issue. It's how we do it. And there's been such an emphasis on results that there's been a willingness to compromise the process. And the process is the part where you go up to the car and you tell the motorist who you are, why you've stopped them, you're courteous to them. You don't assume because they're black or they're in a black neighborhood that they're a criminal. It's just communication. And I'm telling you, we have to do this. We have to do this. I mean, we're getting 15 and 16-year-olds killed, and it's the norm. And I'm like, no, mass shootings have become the norm. No.
So I think what's important for me, for officers, for everybody is to hear you say that, like, legit, I took this job for a reason. It is to keep this community safe. It's to do the right thing. Homicides are happening regularly now. And quite honestly, sometimes with really not a lot of questioning. This cannot keep happening. I go on the news and I say it time and time again at homicide scenes. But for you as the chief to actually say, I can't watch people be slaughtered. Like, this has got to stop. I am going to lead the charge. Here I am. I'm standing in front of officers. I'm going to tell you, I'm actually out doing ground level work where my passion is. Like, I feel that because for me, that's why I took this job. I took this job to keep this community safe. It's something I feel very passionate about. I've felt passionate about it for the last 15 years and will continue to until I retire and probably even after. I just think it's who we are, and that's why we took this job. So I really appreciate you doing that, and I think and hope officers and the community will see that. I know that I think a part of it is because you are from another agency. The community we see in the comments, she doesn't support the officers. And, I think there's just so many layers to that in those comments that people don't know and don't see. So I think for officers to see you leading the charge and your executive staff was out there along with you, making traffic stops, I think that's huge for us to get back into this. I mean, it's time.
Yeah. So it's interesting because so I get asked a lot, what do you have to do for the Black community to trust LMPD? And my answer is I can speak continually about what we need to do. I can attend event after event. But at the end of the day, we are going to have to consistently perform at a high level that shows that we've changed. On that same token, I can preach and speak to the importance of fighting violence day in and day out. But LMPD, I don't believe, is going to respond until they see that I am truly committed to it. And that's why last night we pulled together this detail, officers from around the city, so it was different divisions, to go out and, yes, with my executive command staff and proactively police. Because if I'm asking you to do it, I think at this point I need to show you that yes, I am willing to do it. And truthfully, the best part of my career, and I think any cop's career, is probably when they're in patrol. That's not to say it's easy. It's not. It's easy to say that when you've stepped away from it. I won't lie. By midnight, my eyeballs were scratchy from my contacts, right? Yeah. And I have no idea how to fill a form out on the computer, the MDT. But at the end of the day, I do know how to police. And I know that my executive team does as well. And if us going out and being shoulder to shoulder with the patrol officers is what we need to do to show them, no, we are serious about this and we understand the difficulties of the job, that's what we'll do. Because we have to change the trajectory of the crime, the violent crime in this city. And it is not going to happen with us in our patrol cars parked. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful folks will get on board with it. I'm hopeful that the community will support it. We had some great support from several of our council members, which I'm really appreciative of. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to hopefully rein in the cadence of homicides.
And to that, I appreciate now that some of the council members are, coming out and saying, we support you, we need you. That's something that I think we, as a department, have maybe been a little defensive with the criticism that we've received. But I'm starting to feel more positive about the direction we're taking, and that we're going to be able to get out and do the things that we need to do. There hasn't been a lot of positivity in the last year, but I think it's time for us to start moving in that direction, because it's important. And you've said it time and time again, this is important work. And I agree. This is absolutely some of the most important work, and law enforcement is critical to getting this issue under control here. So with that said, is there anything else you want the public to know about that detail? I mean, so stolen cars, one aspect of it. Stolen cars are a problem. We've talked about it. We've talked about carjackings and stolen cars, and what are the criminals doing in the stolen cars?
Right. So what we're seeing here is a number of vehicles are stolen, and then they're used for the drive-by shootings, the shootings. I mean, there's a direct correlation. And so, it's tempting to want to ignore a stolen car. I hate police pursuits, hate them, because I think there's just so much, there can be the liabilities, high liability associated with them, and everything as a chief you do is risk reward. But the reality of it is, we are seeing so many of our homicides have a stolen vehicle tied to them that if we turn a blind eye to the stolen cars, at that point, I may as well just hand over guns to these folks as well. Yeah. It's a part of the equation that we have to, it's going to be a part of what we have to focus on to rein in the violence. The key is, how do we conduct ourselves again? And every incident is different. You just have to look at the surroundings, and I think just really step back and assess each situation. But I feel confident that the folks here want to work, and I think that the majority of them know how to do the job properly and well.
And I think we saw some due regard.
Oh, let me tell you something. Last night there was
some good driving.
Last night there was a stolen vehicle. It had been wanted for criminal activity, and it was important for me to see. Part of last night was for me to observe, to see how the temperament of folks and how they conducted themselves. And there was multiple scenes. There was and it wasn't all self-initiated. Some of it was just being there. The one that was the fight call, that would have been a shooting. We were just happened to be right. The officers right there disrupted that. And everybody's just, and people say, well, it's because you're the chief and you're there. No, don't. There's certain things that people will modify because you're the chief and you're there. But at the end of the day, there's also, police are very independent. That's okay. But then one of the stolen cars, a pursuit was initiated, and myself and my colleague got behind the pursuit, and it went on a ways. But I'm going to tell you what I saw that the officers in the pursuit and the supervisor absolutely ran it by it was textbook. Yeah. everything that you have to do to ensure that a pursuit is done safely and properly, they did, to include canceling it.
Yeah.
And that's discipline.
Sure.
That's discipline on their part. And so I must add that as a caveat that I did ask them that they don't need to cancel it.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, I need to throw that in there because that's going to come back on me. But the reality of it is there's no traffic.
Well, you're the chief, so.
No, but you know what? The point is they made the decision to cancel at the correct time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it had gone into another jurisdiction. But they'd done everything so well and so judiciously that I just wanted to give time for the local agency to respond and take it over, because we need to get this person off the street.
Right.
But it was a pleasant. I really enjoyed the evening.
So I'm hearing you say, as you're out, you're beginning to see that you can trust officers and their judgment, and I think the more you get out, the more you see, the more you may find that that's the case. I mean, of course, there are going to be issues with so many employees. I mean, this is just like a large business. It's going to happen. We're going to deal with it. We just need the public to know that we're moving into a good space. We're doing things the right way. Here we are. We're back out. We're policing. We're LMPD. And Chief,
good job.
Great talking to you. So that's on the record with LMPD and Chief Shields.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.